Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Players Championship Initial Research Show. Oh boy, what a rough week for yours truly. But I hope you had a lot of success for the first double tournament week of 2024. Hope you had lots of Scotty Scheffler, a lot on outright, used him a ton in DFS. And I hope you sprinkled in some Bryce Garnett down at the Puerto Rico Open if you played some DFS or had him in your outrights. For me, it was a rough week. I backed Matt Fitzpatrick, one of 11 players to miss the cut at the API. I did have Victor Peri down at the Puerto Rico Open, who finished one shot back of the playoff. So I had a decent little sweat in that regard, but overall was not a good week for yours truly. So I hope you followed the very few good plays that I had this past week, as in Sahith Theegala, Victor Peri, and avoided the Matt Fitzpatrick and other disasters of recommendations that I had. So we're going to try and be better for the Players Championship, what many consider the fifth major of the season, one of the biggest tournaments of the year. Got a great show for you all, so let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. There are a lot of great golf tools out there. Absolutely, no doubt about that. I simply believe Fantasy National is the best, so go check out FantasyNational.com. It is going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. You're not going to regret checking out FantasyNational.com. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where I post research weekly on the PGA Tour, generally around previous winners of that week's tournament, course history, course stats, and that'll come out tomorrow for the Players Championship. So if you want to see the weekly research I do for the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests that I play. Those come out Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show on Wednesday evenings. And then lastly, for social media, and speaking of Wednesday evenings, Gabe's social media handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation. And if you are a subscriber to his article, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night after calls, as he is gracious enough to host me over there, and as we continue the DFS talk and finalize our lineups and talk about everything DFS. So go show him some support. His handle is in the description, and subscribe to that article. It is free to subscribe to, by the way. And then lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you all. How was your first double tournament week of 2024? Did you play much in Puerto Rico? Did you have a lot of Scotty Scheffler? Did you back Shane Lowry, who had a very strong tournament? Sahith Theegala, all of the other players that performed well at the API. Did you avoid the Tommy Fleetwood, the Matt Fitzpatrick, Minwoo Lee, who, again, very few things that I got correct. I was nowhere near Minwoo Lee and his gaudy ownerships. Finishes pretty much near the bottom of the players who made the cut. So I want to hear about your success this week at the API in Puerto Rico, and want to hear who you are targeting in your early look or early research for the players. So with that said, let's do our initial research for the 2024 Players Championship. And we start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. The Players Championship at its usual host, TPC Sawgrass, which there are two courses at TPC Sawgrass. The most famous, obviously, is the Pete Dye Stadium course. There is another course called the Valley course at Sawgrass, but we are going to be obviously focusing on the stadium course at TPC Sawgrass. Probably one of the most famous holes in golf, the par 3 17th Island Green. We are in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. As I mentioned, the architect Pete Dye, 1980 now. It did go through some renovations in 2006 and most recently in 2016. But another big facet or factor that I want you all to remember throughout the week is that the Players' Championship historically was played in May after the Masters, generally before the U.S. Open. It was normally played in May, and in 2019 it moved to March, and where it sits in the calendar or on the calendar now. So as you're moving forward with your research this week, just remember that the Players moved to March on the calendar, and the difference at Ponte Vedra Beach in March from May is quite staggering. For example, the greens, they are Poa Trivialis Overseed. They are Bermuda base, but they are Poa Trivialis Overseed, and the Poa Trivialis is dominant right now as the Bermuda has not grown in. Whereas if you're going to be looking at historical data, the Bermuda would have been grown in full in that time. So lots of things have changed with the move from May to March. So keep that in mind throughout this week, and I'll try to remind you throughout the week of that. But that is definitely something that I want to emphasize early on this week, especially as you're going through your research, is that in 2019, the Players moved to March. So really, we're going to be just looking at 2019 forward, which is what I normally do anyway. The stadium course at Sawgrass is a medium-length par 72, measuring just under 7,300 yards. You have your full allotment of 4 par 3s and 4 par 5s at Sawgrass. The greens are slightly below average in terms of size. We're looking at 5,500 square feet in terms of average green size, whereas on the PGA Tour it's roughly 6,000. The fairways, this number can be a little bit misleading. These fairways are wide in landing areas, with the exception of, as Pete Dye likes to do, he places strategic bunkers, lots of dog legs or even S-curves to holes. So the fairways don't play as wide as this 26 acres would indicate. Definitely, as we'll see throughout tonight and throughout the week, a premium on accuracy being in the fairway, and how it's not really all that easy to do here unless you're really, really clubbing down. Lots of rough, but being in Florida, probably no surprise, all 18 holes have water in play at the stadium course. As I mentioned earlier, these are Bermuda base greens, but Poa Trivialis Overseed. So we've got a few courses that fit that description. Bermuda base, Poa Trivialis Overseed. The fairways and rough are Champion Bermuda with Rye Overseed. The rough is kept pretty long here. Another one of Pete Dye's designs or typical layouts here is that he really wants to force players to shape shots and to reward being in the fairway and punish you if you are not in the fairway. So there you go. There is a look at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet Players Championship. Key things to keep in mind. We are perhaps going to look at some Pete Dye architect filters. Pete Dye has his hands on a few courses on the PGA Tour. RBC Heritage, the Travelers Championship, which is at TPC River Highlands. Let's see, there are a couple of others, obviously Sawgrass, the PGA West, which is the host of the American Express, or the main course at the American Express. So he has his hands on a few courses on the PGA Tour. But other things to keep in mind, about a mid-length par 72, a little bit smaller than average green sizes, slightly smaller, 18 holes. I mean, just lots of water in play, and we'll see when we go to the early look file that this course can just generally tend to be pretty volatile because of that. So not a lot of correlation between past success and or correlating success if you've had good results in the past here. And we are on Bermuda base but Poitrivalis overseeded greens. With that, we are going to move to Fantasy National and get a look at the players in the field this week at the Players Championship. You see that I've got this set for the last 12 months, 36 rounds. In that time frame, our top total performers with no filters, just straight up who's played the best in the past 36 rounds: Ludwig Aubert, Colin Morikawa, Rory, Xander, Scotty Scheffler, EVR, Eric Van Rooyen, Victor Alvin, Minwoo Lee, Bo Hostler, and Adam Scott. Now, do note that the Players Championship, the Arnold Palmer is not in here yet, nor is the Puerto Rico, so you have to imagine Scotty Scheffler is probably going to rise a little bit with that. Morikawa going to fall, etc., etc. One thing we can do right off the bat, this is a Pete Dye design, so we're going to have to expand the time frame here. Just go back to the last 2 years, and the most rounds we see Patrick Cantlay here with 25. The American Express, again, as I mentioned, the PGA West, host of the American Express, the Stadium course specifically, Travelers, TPC, River Highlands, RBC Heritage, the Harbor Town, and of course the Players. So those are the main courses, or the continuous courses on the PGA Tour. Now, in 2021, the most recent Pete Dye designed major championship course was the 2021 PGA at Kiowa. So we could perhaps as well look at a little bit of that throughout the week. But those are the courses that are the most are common, that they are regulars on the PGA Tour. So in the past 2 years on Pete Dye Designs, your top performers have been Xander, Scotty Scheffler, Keegan, Patrick Cantlay, Adam Hadwin, Justin Thomas, Carson Young, Minwoo Lee, Jordan Spieth, and Sung Jae. Those are your top 10 in terms of total performance on Pete Dye courses. Not going to do too much else here as of right now until we go through the historic conditions and the course breakdown. Before we go to the course breakdown, let's just take a look at historic conditions just very, very quickly. Very, very difficult last year at the beginning or in the first 2 rounds. Then it tailed off, made it easy to average when the wind kind of died down a little bit. But you see, the wind is generally a factor, and we'll start checking that tomorrow in the Day to Dive show. But wind can absolutely be a factor since this is only a mile from the Atlantic Ocean. And if the wind picks up, it can be really, really difficult. But generally, you're looking at about average in terms of difficulty. And if you are a returning viewer, you know how I don't generally like to look at average difficulty relative to par. I generally use that filter if it's easy or if it's difficult. So we're looking at a lot of average here. You can get difficult if the winds really, really pick up. More so difficult than easy would be my lean. But generally speaking, we're looking at an average difficulty tournament. Of course, Bermuda base, but Poitrivalis overseed. Rough has generally been kept long, although they've grown it the last couple of years from average length. And then the green speeds, they are fast and even lightning, as you can see here. And they've sped them up recently as well. So a little bit of changes here to Sawgrass with the rough being grown out a little bit, the greens being sped up a little bit. We're not going to do too much with green speed since we have the specific Poitrivalis overseed courses. But there's a look at the historic conditions. and why we aren't going to be looking, at least in an initial research aspect, why we're not going to be looking at any scoring filters. So let's go ahead and go to the course breakdown in Fantasy National. TPC Sawgrass, as I mentioned, 4 par 3s, 4 par 5s, the most famous maybe hole in all of golf. The Island Green only measures 137 on the scorecard, can stretch to about 150, can play as low as about 110. Plays a little bit over par. You look for the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. See where par falls. You see the 9th is a 10th over, 800ths over, 600ths over, the 13th, 300ths over still. So you have to go to the 14th most difficult or the 5th easiest hole before you fall under par. Just showing you how many scores or how many holes played over par here. And all of your scoring opportunities are on these par 5s. The second easiest hole on the course, par 5 second, plays to a third of a shot under par. Par 5 16th does play to about 4/10 of a shot under par. You have a little bit more than a quarter and about 1500ths. You also have a very short par 4 12th, plays under par, but then everything else generally plays over par. You do have a couple of good eagle opportunities on those par 5s. Few scoring opportunities with these birdies, with the shorter with the short par 4 and the other par 5s. But really, with all the water in play, you're looking at some big scores if you aren't careful. 8% double bogey, 8% double bogey, 25% bogey, 25% bogey. Just lots of bigger scores are an option or are available here at Sawgrass. Whatever length of the course there are on these par 4s. A lot of the more difficult holes here are these longer par 4s. Par 4 5th, 471, 451, 481, second hardest course or second hardest hole on the course, plays to a quarter of a shot over par. 470, 462. So there's where a lot of the length of the course comes in, mitigated a little bit with these par 5s that are somewhat short. 523, 558. Now you do have the 602 par 5 9th. Pretty darn long, but everything else, and par 5 wise, is pretty short. Let's look at strokes gained by shot type for top 10s, 5s, and winners. You see for the top 10s, much akin to other Pete Dye designs, you're going to have to be very, very good with your irons, as these greens are tricky. There are several levels to them. False fronts protected by bunkers. So you really have to be dialed in with your irons to compete at a Pete Dye course. Off the tee and around the green, pretty similar. Off the tee, slightly higher. We move to the top 5s. You see just the added emphasis in approach. Of course, if you're making putts, you're going to be rising on the leaderboard. But off the tee and around the green are pretty darn similar. And then for your winners, the around the green actually overtakes the off the tee. But really, it's all about the iron play, as Pete Dye designs generally are. Moving to strokes gained by hole by par. Again, professionals, they're gonna have to take advantage of the par 5s. That's where most of their scoring happens. A little bit lagging in the par 3s. A little surprising. The differences get accentuated as you move to the top 5s. And for your winners, par 3s really do lag. Not that they're completely unimportant. We'll have a little bit of look at some par 3s, but it's really about the par 5s, and for the winners, especially, their performance on those aforementioned difficult par 4s, longer par 4s. Moving to hole composition, of course, we've got the most famous Island Green that plays less than 150 yards. 2 par 3s, 175 to 2, and then 1 extremely long par 3. Plays to 236, 231, 237. I would have gotten there eventually, maybe. 237 on the scorecard, plays to 2/10 of a shot over par. Just very, very difficult par 3. We do have 3 short, not drivable, but short two short, not drivable par 4s, and then 1 drivable par 4. They generally make one of the par 4s drivable for a couple of those days. It does not say that on the scorecard, but they have added a tee box in recent years to, I believe it's the 12th here. The par 4 12th can play to about 300 yards, making it drivable, a risk-reward par 4. So on the scorecard, 3 short par 4s, but 1 is drivable. I just want to make you aware of that. 2 from 400 to 450, but the majority of the par 4s, half of the par 4s at Sawgrass are 450 to 5. Then the par 5s, 2 shorter ones, 1 medium length and 1 long par 5. Approach shot distribution, pretty evenly distributed. You do see the most prevalent being in the 200 plus due to the nature of players knowing that there's a little bit of emphasis on accuracy here. So they really make a conscious effort to find the fairways, and which will leave them with longer approaches, especially if they're taking less than driver off the tee. But fairly evenly distributed in terms of in relation to the average tour event. In terms of approach shots, historic cut line, generally around this +1 to maybe +3 range. You see in the early 2010s, or 2010s, I should say, 5 straight years where it was a +1 cut. It's been +3 the past couple of years with the enormous amount of wind that we've had in the first 2 rounds each of the past 2 years. It has gotten to -1 a couple of times when the wind was very calm. Of course, it's been up to as high as +6 if the wind is just drastic. But generally, we're looking at a roughly around +1 to +3 in terms of cut line. Scoring, 20% or almost 20% birdies, 17% bogeys, and that doubles bar is gigantic. The Eagles bar, pretty non-existent. So you've got about the same number of scores under par and over par. It's what leads to the average difficulty. Driving accuracy, a little bit higher than the average tour event. Again, a little bit of preference or players realizing the premium on accuracy here. Green and regulation percentage, even though this isn't a long course, much lower than the average tour event. These greens are difficult. Again, the false fronts protected by bunkers and water. They're just generally difficult to hit, and scrambling is much more difficult here than the average tour event. Something that we might want to think about. And due to the speed of the greens, even though these greens are small compared to the PGA Tour average, you see the high number of 3 putts per round. That's due to the speed of these greens. These greens are generally fast, can't even play the lightning. Distance, much lower here than the average tour event. Again, the emphasis on accuracy and being in the fairway. And proximity, much higher, much further away than the average tour event, just lending to the difficulty that the greens are. There's a look at Sawgrass from a scorecard and graphical view. We now go back to the player page view, the strokes gained view in Fantasy National for the players in the field this week. Not going to do anything with scoring. Again, this plays to about average, and I generally use this filter when it's easy or difficult. So instead, let's just go ahead and take a look at a couple of strokes gained metrics here. We saw just how important approach is throughout the top 10s, the 5s, and the winners. So your top performers in approach the last 36 rounds or 12 months, whichever happens to come first. Scotty Scheffler, and that's just probably going to rise. Xander, Lucas Glover, Sam Ryder, Colin Morikawa, Tom Hoagie, Ches Reavie, Chris Kirk, Shane Lowry, and Tony Finau. Make sure I don't have any other filters. Yep, just just straight up, there's your top strokes gained approach players. Around the green is going to have a little bit of a factor. We saw how difficult these greens are to hit. So your top strokes gained around the green players in the field this week: Aaron Baddeley, Mac Hughes, S.H. Kim, Hideki, Troy Merritt, Scotty Scheffler, Minwoo Lee, Maverick McNeely, Ben Griffin, and Justin Thomas are your top 10 in strokes gained around the green. Give me one moment as I try to center the camera. Lastly, give me a moment here as I am going to gather the courses that have or that are base Bermuda but Poa Trivialis overseed. So the first one is Harbortown, host of the RBC Heritage. One of the last tournaments on the schedule that'll have the Poa Trivialis be dominant at that time. Innisbrook, the Copperhead course, host of the Valspar. Quail Hollow, the host of the Wells Fargo Bermuda base, but Poa Trivialis overseed. I believe it's this top one. The Stadium course, PGA West Stadium course at PGA West, host of the American Express. TPC San Antonio, the week before the Masters, at the Valero Texas Open. TPC San Antonio. Of course, where we are this week, TPC Sawgrass and TPC Scottsdale, host of the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Those are the courses that are regulars on the PGA Tour that have Bermuda base Poa Trivialis overseed. If you wanted to look at the match play at Austin Country Club, that was also a Bermuda base Poa Trivialis overseed venue, but Fantasy National doesn't gather stats since that is not a stroke play event. So in the last 2 years, your top putters on Bermuda base Poa Trivialis overseeded green surfaces: Sam Burns, Matt Kuchar, Taylor Montgomery, Brendan Todd, Justin Suh, Sam Ryder, Chad Ramey, Ben Griffin, Billy Horschel, and Troy Merritt are your top putters on the Poa Trivialis overseeded greens. All right, with that, we're going to clear. Actually, not going to look at anything else. Let's just go ahead and go to the tournament history, the strokes gained total tab. Now, this will be slightly misleading because you'll see that they go back 5 years, but they're going all the way back to 2018 because remember, 2020's was canceled. So really what we're wanting to focus on are these 4 years here. That's the 4 years that we really want to focus on because that is when the Players' Championship moved from May to March on the schedule. And there have been 5 players, 5, that have made the cut in all 4 of those tournaments. But your technical strokes gained total leader in the past 5 years is Tommy Fleetwood. It probably would drop a decent amount since 2018's was a top 10. Keegan has played well here, although he did miss the cut last year. He has a top 5, a top 20. Justin Thomas, your winner in 2021. J-Day has played well here in the past 4 years. Tom Hoagie is one of the players that has made the cut in all 4 of the March Players' Championships. Decent performances, nothing outstanding other than, the tie for 3rd last year, but, just fairly solid all the way around. Shane Lowry has been pretty good. He missed the cut in 2019 and has been pretty solid elsewhere or otherwise. Your defending champion, Scotty Scheffler, who is coming off the win at the API. The other players that you might want to make a note of that have made the cut in all 4 March Players' Championships. Of course, we mentioned Tom Hoagie earlier. Brian Harmon is 4 for 4 in March. That's 2. Denny McCarthy. That is 3. Patton Kazire is 4. And I thought there was a 5th. I might be mistaken. There might actually only be 4. There's McCarthy, Brian Harman, Tom Hoagie. Oh, Justin Thomas. So there are 5. Justin Thomas, Tom Hoagie, Brian Harman, Denny McCarthy, and Patton Gazier are your 5 players who have made the cut every single March Players Championship. There are a few players that are 3 for 4 or even 3 for 3. Maybe they didn't play one of those years. Like, for example, Christian Bezadenhout is 2 for 2. Didn't play in 2019 or 2022. Let's see, like EVR 1 for 1, Svensson 1 for 1. But those are the 5 players that have been that are 4 for 4 in the March Players Championships. And there's a look at the players in the past 5 editions of the Players Championship who are your strokes gained total leaders. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played well. Matthew Neesmith 0 for 3, Martin Laird 1 for 4, Bo Hostler 0 for 4. Again, I'm focused mainly on going back to just 2019. Patrick Rogers 2 for 4, but 2 very awful made cuts and 2 missed cuts. Ches Reavie, Andrew Putnam 0 for 4, both of them. Mackenzie Hughes 0 for 3, despite a little bit of a look at around the green. He's not performed well here. Adam Shank 0 for 3, Joseph Bramlett 0 for 2, Lucas Glover 2 for 4, Troy Merritt 1 for 4, Wyndham Clark 1 for 4, 1 for 3 and a DQ. So there's a look at some of the players who have not played well at the Players Championship, specifically the March Players Championships. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move to Microsoft Excel. Take a look at Sawgrass compared to other full field course, the average full field course on the PGA Tour. I think this is a slightly misleading number here. We saw that off the tee just wasn't a huge factor. It is getting enhanced based on, the other or against other full field courses, but I think this is a tad misleading. I'm mostly focused on this number here, the 19% in the approach. The around the green, while it is saying that it is about 8% less important, I am going to factor in some around the green because we've seen how difficult these greens are to hit. And putting, we'll just be focused on the Poa Trivialis Overseed. Probably have a usual amount of weight, maybe even slightly less in terms of total putting, and to look at some 3-putt avoidance perhaps as well. But I'm mainly focused on this. I think this is misleading. I think there's a certain aspect of off the tee that's gonna play well or want to be the focus. I don't think we're going to be looking at off the tee because I don't think bombers are truly rewarded here. Moving to driving and greens. You see distance 10% less important. Surprisingly, fairways 11% less important. I would have thought that they would have been the more important part of off the tee. Instead, it's kind of in these good drives gained. Whether players are able to hit the fairway or they are proficient enough to hit the green from the rough, because these fairways can get difficult to hit even if you are clubbing down. You see the greens basically full field course average on the PGA Tour. So I'm going to be looking at least early on in my research this week at these, mainly this statistic. And of course, we'll go through the prior leaderboards tomorrow on the Data Dive show and figure out if we need to adjust. But for now, this is where my focus is on the driving and greens page view in Fantasy National. We see scoring pretty erratic here. I'm not too worried about the Eagles. The Eagles are pretty non-existent. Birdies and bogeys has been erratic, so I am quite interested in looking at the prior leaderboards tomorrow night and seeing what plays better here. So no real lean. You could maybe argue double bogey avoidance, but every time I think about that, it doesn't seem to present too much of a factor. Par 3s, 7%. Okay. The one, your 17th, your most famous hole, the Island Green. This is such a huge number because not every course has a short par 3. Like Valero doesn't have a short par 3. So this is a bit of an outlier considering that not every course has a short par 3. 7% more important. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know. I would have thought this would have been under in terms of importance. Moving into the par 4s makes a lot of sense. We do have 3 par 4s that measure under 400 yards, including one drivable. So I do agree with this sentiment that the 350 to 4 par 4s could be important, and the 450 to 5s seem to have a little bit of an additional merit or importance to them because that's generally the most difficult holes at Sawgrass. So it would make sense that they're carrying a little bit of weight here, but no surprise, the par 5s are carrying a whole lot. I mean, a whole lot of the weight. 12.5% more important than the average full field course. So again, when we go into the data dive tomorrow, we'll be able to look at some specific data or Sawgrass only data. Look at where the strokes gained are being accrued at Sawgrass. But we're going to end the show off, as we always do on a Sunday night, with the early look file. This is performance at Sawgrass. I would normally say the last 5 years, but remember the 2020 edition was canceled, so we are going back to 2023, 2022, 2021, and 2019. The last 4 editions. And conveniently, that is when the players moved to March on the schedule. So while I normally like to take out players who have only played one time, and I still might do that, you look at Tom Hoagie, one of the 5 players who's made the cut. Every single March edition of the Players' Championship you see, just the iron play has been immaculate here. Generally what he's known for, yes, but even so at Sawgrass, he's been fantastic. Bezadenhout has been pretty good. Brian Harmon, another one of the players who has made every cut in the March Players' Championships, played pretty well here. Average finish of 30th. Siwoo has been good. Victor, not so much in the short game, but of course the ball striking he's been good. Justin Rose has been solid all throughout his bag. Off the tee, irons, chipping, and putting. He's been solid. J-Day, Justin Thomas, both been pretty good. Homa and Fleetwood. So there's a look at some of the top performers. I think I will go ahead and filter out the players who have only played it once. So as long as a player has played the Players' Championship multiple times when it's been held in March, what are these players doing well that have been seemingly rising on the leaderboards? We'll take a look at the players who have averaged the top 40. This is 15 players. This is a 1.5 in off the tee. Fairly solid here. Only one player negative, which is Bezadenhout. That's not really his game. So, okay. Approach, 2.5. You have a couple players that are negative, but you got some big numbers. 5, 5.5, 4.5, 3.5, 4, 4.5. So iron play, again, going to be a major focal point this week at Sawgrass, at least for me. Around the green, 0.7. It's fine. Not mandatory, but I think we're going to be looking at a little bit of some around the green, considering how difficult these greens are to hit. And surprisingly, look at this putting. The putting is actually like a 0.2. Not a whole lot of great putting going on. It's really about the irons. And at least for the players who have played it the best, a little bit of off the tee, think that's slightly misleading. I still am focused on the approach. All right, moving to distance and fairways and greens. Distance, not a factor. You see the players who have played it the best are negative in terms of distance. Even here at Sawgrass, it's just not an important factor. Again, the emphasis has been on the fairways. Being in the fairway here at Sawgrass. This is a 2.0. Good drives, a 1.8. Greens is a 1.9. So emphasis on accuracy over the distance this week. Only 2 players negative. 3 technically, I guess. Negative in terms of fairways gained. And your top performers. Only one player negative in good drives gained. That's Bezaidnoot. So the more I'm thinking about it, the more I like this good drives gained statistic. Absolutely. Looking at scoring, what I would have thought would have been the bogey avoidance. You got 1 player negative, and it's all the way at the bottom in Will Z. There's a 1.8. We have a 1.5 in birdies gained. Now, Bezaidnoot has been avoiding bogeys and avoiding doubles at a fantastic rate. He hadn't been gaining much of the birdies. But really, I mean, some of the bigger numbers are in the bogey avoidance as well. 3.2, 3.2, 3.2, where the highest here is a 3. So we actually might be getting a look at bogey avoidance this week. But we will go into the prior leaderboards tomorrow and confirm this. But at least as of Sunday evening, looks like the higher raw numbers and the more consistent is in the bogey avoidance. Good evening, Pete. Thanks for jumping in chat. Saw your reply to somebody that looks like you're gonna have some warm weather in Chicago and be able to get out on the links this week. So looking forward to that. Glad you are able to jump in chat, and I hope you had a much better weekend for the Arnold Palmer and the Puerto Rico that I did. Did have a decent sweat with Victor Puri, but overall it was I was taking a bath. I just did not get much right with the Arnold Palmer. But hopefully you had a lot of success. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. 1:30 tee time tomorrow. Attaboy. That's the way you do it. Get out on the course while you can. All right. Moving into the par 3s, 4s and 5s. Par 3s, yeah, I just don't see them mattering. This is only a 0.4. The par 4s, a 3.2. Salvage the API, luckily. Not good, though. Hey, salvage is salvage. You know, it wasn't a complete disaster. Mine was pretty close to a complete disaster, considering I backed Fitzpatrick, one of 11 players to miss the cut. Backed Cantley. He was like T44. It's just not a good week for me. And then the par 5s here are 1.5. So I want you to notice, just like we saw in the course breakdown in Fantasy National, how the 4s and the 5s really rose as you went up the leaderboard. Not a single player negative here in terms of par 4s. Only 1 player negative in par 5 performance. Only 1 player negative in par 5 performance. Par 5s are going to carry pretty significant amount of weight. That's where you are able to score here at Sawgrass. In terms of par 4s, looks like the 450 to 500. Again, like I mentioned, the hardest holes at Sawgrass are these longer par 4s. Only 1 player negative here. So when we go into the data dive tomorrow, I'll be quite interested to see how the strokes gained break out in the various par 3s, 4s, and 5s. My guess is, at least based on this, is that the par 4s, 450 to 500, are going to be the major focal point in the par 4s. But we'll see tomorrow. And then the par 5s, yeah, makes sense. The 500 to 550, since 2 fall into this range. And really, you could easily see 3, considering there's a 558 on the scorecard, so you could easily see that falling into here. But really, we might be looking at total par 5s. Depends on what the raw numbers say tomorrow. Lastly, looking at proximity, I'll never forgive PGA and a certain group of people for canceling the players when Hideki was up. Like, see, yeah, Hideki was in fuego in 2020, and because of reasons, they called it. That was actually the first event that was called. First event that was canceled. It was Hideki was on fire that first round. Absolutely. Interesting to note that total procs here looks to be decent, if nothing else. Hideki slightly less. J-Day basically field average in terms of total procs. Sung Jae's pretty darn close to it. Okay. No real range stands out. It's just been kind of solid all the way throughout. Maybe this 125 to 150. Maybe. You got one really poor performance from J-Day here, but like Ryan Moore's been fantastic at that range. Victor's been great at that range. Rose has been good at that range. So, I don't know. It will be interesting to see the prior leaderboards tomorrow and see how the proximity shapes up. Because all of these ranges seem pretty darn correlating, at least for the players who have played the players the best in the last 4 editions. So, well, that's going to do it for the show this evening. Bring back everybody in the field who has played. Their best average, sorted by best average finish. I want to thank P for jumping in chat there, and thanks to everyone else who tunes in, watches, and listens, and supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. Very much appreciate it. It always helps me out when you do that. Love what I do, taking an in-depth look at sports statistics, giving you a statistician's point of view in seeing or diving into the numbers, telling you what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. This week, not so much, considering I was just flat out wrong on the Arnold Palmer. Just wrong. But we're going to try to turn it around for the Players' Championship. So looking forward to another fun week and some big tournaments. Big tournaments or GPPs, at least over on DraftKings. So going to be looking forward to that. For all of the wagers you made this past week for the Arnold Palmer and the Puerto Rico Open, for all the DFS contests you played for the Arnold Palmer and the Puerto Rico Open, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.